Commander Al stood at the observation window and watched the transport ship dock with Nexus Station. His four arms were folded behind his back, and his bioluminescent scales flickered with soft blue light. This happened when he was thinking deeply about something. Today, he was thinking about the new cadets. Every cycle, young warriors from across the galaxy came to Nexus Station. They came to learn. They came to prove themselves. The hegemony had run this training academy for over 3,000 years, and in that time, they had shaped the finest soldiers the galaxy had ever seen. The transport doors opened. Al watched the cadets file out in neat lines. He saw the usual mix of species. There were with their green scales and venomous fangs. There were their bodies made of living crystal that caught the light and scattered it into rainbows. There were massive beings that stood over 3 meters tall and had armor growing from their own bones. And then there was something else. A human female walked at the back of the group. She was small. She had no scales, no armor, no claws. Her skin was soft and brown, and her hair was black and pulled back tight against her head. She wore a simple uniform with a patch on her shoulder that showed a blue and green planet. Al made a sound of displeasure. The humans had only made contact with the Galactic Compact 12 years ago. They were new. They were young. Their species had only been traveling between stars for less than 2 centuries. By galactic standards, they were infants. But the High Council had decided to give them a chance. They wanted to see what humans could do, so they had allowed one human to come to Nexus Station as an observer. Her name was Vance. Her rank was Sergeant Major. She was 34 years old. Al had read her file. There was nothing special about her. She had served in her planet's military for 16 years. She had fought in some small conflicts on distant colonies. She had no cybernetic enhancements, no genetic modifications, no special equipment. She was just flesh and blood and bone. He could not understand why Earth had sent her. If they wanted to impress the hegemony, they should have sent someone stronger, someone faster, someone who would not break so easily. The cadets gathered in the main hall for orientation. Instructor X stood before them, his scales glowing with authority. He was one of the finest warriors Al had ever trained, and now he trained others. X looked at the new cadets with all 6 of his eyes. He saw potential in the. He saw discipline in the. He saw raw power in the. He saw nothing in the human. Stood at the back of the group. She did not try to push forward. She did not try to make herself noticed. She simply stood and watched and listened. One of the cadets noticed her. His name was Al, and he was the son of a noble family. His scales were bright green, and his venom glands were fully developed. He had been trained in combat since he could walk. He leaned toward another cadet and whispered something. They both laughed. The sound was sharp and cruel. Did not react. Her face showed nothing. X began to speak. He told the cadets about the honor of training at Nexus Station. He told them about the challenges they would face. He told them that many of them would fail, and that failure meant shame for their entire species. Then he looked directly at. "We have an observer this cycle," he said. His voice was cold. "The humans have sent one of their soldiers to watch us train. She will participate in exercises, but she is not a true cadet. She is here to learn what real warriors look like." Some of the cadets laughed. Al laughed loudest of all. His expression did not change. She simply nodded once, accepting the instructor's words. After orientation, the cadets were assigned to their training groups. X made his assignments carefully. The strongest cadets were placed together so they could push each other. The cadets were placed together so they could learn from each other. Was placed with the weakest cadets. There was a young whose crystal structure had a flaw that made him slow. There was a female who was small for her species and often mocked by others. There was a whose venom glands had never fully developed. This was an insult. Everyone knew it. X was telling that she belonged with the failures. Accepted the assignment without complaint. She introduced herself to her group members with a small smile. She learned their names. She asked about their homes and their families. The other cadets watched her with confusion. They had expected her to be angry. They had expected her to demand better treatment. But she did none of these things. Days passed, trained with her group. She ran when they ran. She lifted when they lifted. She fought when they fought. She was never the best, but she was never the worst either. She was simply adequate. Al continued to mock her. He would pass her in the corridors and make comments about her soft skin. He would ask her how it felt to be so weak. He would wonder aloud how humans had ever survived on their own planet. Would listen to his words. She would nod politely, and then she would walk away. The other instructors began to think she was broken. Perhaps her spirit had been crushed by the reality of galactic civilization. Perhaps she had realized how small and insignificant her species truly was. Only Commander Al watched her with uncertainty. Something about her bothered him. Something about the way she moved. Something about the way her eyes tracked everything around her, missing nothing. Late one night, he found her alone in the observation deck. She was standing at the main window, staring out at the stars. Somewhere in that vast darkness was a small yellow sun, and around that sun orbited a small blue planet. Earth. Al watched her from the doorway. She did not seem to notice him, but he suspected she knew he was there. Her hands were at her sides. As he watched, she began to flex her fingers slowly. It was a strange movement, deliberate and controlled. Her hands opened and closed, like she was preparing for something. Then she stopped. Her hands went still. And for just a moment, Al saw something move behind her eyes. Something old, something patient, something that had been waiting for a very long time. He stepped back into the shadows and left without speaking. That night, he could not sleep. He kept thinking about what he had seen. He kept thinking about how the humans had survived on their death world, surrounded by predators and disasters and diseases that would have killed any other species. He kept thinking about how they had looked at the stars and refused to stay home. And he kept thinking about that smile had given to her training group. It had seemed so warm, so friendly. But now he wondered if it had been something else entirely. 6 weeks had passed since arrived at Nexus Station. In that time, she had become invisible. The other cadets had stopped paying attention to her. She performed well enough to avoid punishment, but never well enough to earn praise. She ran in the middle of the pack. She scored average marks on tactical simulations. She fought adequately in hand-to-hand combat training. She was boring, and in a place like Nexus Station, boring meant forgotten. Only Al still remembered her. The young had made it his personal mission to remind everyone that a human was among them. He would point at her during meals and make jokes about prey animals. He would bump into her in corridors and apologize with mock sweetness. He would ask instructors to explain things more slowly so the primitive human could understand. Never responded. She would look at him with calm eyes and walk away. This made Al angrier than any insult could have. Today was weapons training day. The cadets gathered in the main combat hall, a vast chamber with reinforced walls that could withstand almost any attack. Instructor X stood at the center, holding something that made several cadets step backward. It was a sonic blade launcher. The weapon was sleek and silver, about the length of an arm. It did not fire bullets or energy bolts. It fired concentrated sound waves that had been compressed and shaped into a blade of pure vibration. A sonic blade could cut through starship armor. It could slice a warrior in half. It moved at nearly the speed of sound itself. No living creature in the galaxy could catch a sonic blade. The physics simply did not allow it. By the time your brain recognized the blade was coming, it had already passed through your body. X held up the weapon for all to see. His scales glowed with pride. The hegemony had invented this weapon 300 years ago, and no other species had ever managed to copy it. Today you will learn evasion techniques, X announced. A sonic blade cannot be blocked or deflected. Your only option is to not be where it strikes. You must read your enemy's body language. You must predict where they will aim. You must move before they fire. He demonstrated by having an assistant fire at him. X's body shifted to the side, and the blade passed through empty air. It struck the far wall and left a deep groove in the reinforced metal. The cadets were impressed. Several of them clapped their upper limbs together in applause. X called for volunteers. Several stepped forward, eager to show their speed. One by one they faced the launcher. Most managed to dodge. A few were too slow and received minor burns from near misses. Then Al raised his hand. "Instructor," he said, his voice smooth and confident, "I would like to challenge the human observer." The hall went quiet. Everyone turned to look at. X's scales flickered with something that might have been amusement. This was not strictly against the rules. Observers could participate in challenges if both parties agreed. "Observer Vance," X said, "do you accept this challenge?" Looked at Al. There was grinning, showing all of his needle-sharp teeth. His venom glands pulsed with anticipation. "Yes," she said. A murmur ran through the crowd. Some cadets laughed nervously. Others shook their heads in pity. The human was about to be humiliated in front of everyone. Walk to the challenge platform. It was a raised circle about 10 meters across. Al took his position on one side, holding the sonic blade launcher, stood on the other side, empty-handed. "The rules are simple," X announced. 3 shots, dodge or be struck. Observer, you may begin moving whenever you choose. Al raised the weapon. His eyes locked onto. She stood perfectly still. "Any last words, human?" he asked. Tilted her head slightly. "I am ready." Al fired. The sonic blade screamed across the distance between them. It was a visible shimmer in the air, a ripple of compressed destruction moving faster than most eyes could track. Did not dodge. Her right hand moved. The motion was so fast that several species present could not see it happen. Their eyes simply registered her arm in one position, and then in another. She caught the sonic blade between her index finger and her middle finger. The sound died. The energy dissipated. The blade simply stopped, trapped between 2 soft human fingers as if it were a flower petal caught in a gentle breeze. The silence in the hall was absolute. Al stared. His mouth hung open. The weapon trembled in his grip. Smiled. It was a small smile, warm, almost friendly. But there was something behind it that made every predator instinct in every species present scream at them to run. "Again?" she asked. Al fired again, and again. Both times caught the blade with that same casual motion. Both times she smiled that same warm smile. The second blade she held for a moment, examining it between her fingers like it was an interesting insect. Then she flicked her wrist, and the residual energy shot across the hall. It struck the far wall and left a burning mark in the reinforced metal. Al dropped the weapon. His venom glands were leaking now, releasing fear pheromones that he could not control. His species did this only in the presence of apex predators, creatures that could kill them without effort. He was doing it now, looking at a small human female. The other cadets were scrambling backward. Some had pressed themselves against the walls. The warriors, who feared nothing, had moved into defensive positions. The crystals were vibrating at frequencies that indicated extreme stress. Instructor X's bioluminescence had gone completely dark. This happened only when it experienced profound shock. Step down from the platform. She walked through the crowd of cadets and they parted before her like water around a stone. No one spoke. No one moved to stop her. She paused at the door and looked back. "I apologize for the disruption, instructor," she said. Her voice was calm and polite. "Please continue with your lesson." Then she left. For a long moment, no one moved. The cadets looked at each other with wide eyes. The instructors looked at each other with growing horror. Finally, X spoke. His voice was barely a whisper. "What is she?" No one had an answer. In the observation room above the combat hall, Commander Al stood frozen. He had seen everything. He had watched the impossible happen 3 times. His communications device began to beep. It was a priority message from the Hegemony High Council. They had been watching too. Al knew that everything was about to change. He did not know if that change would be good or bad. He only knew that humanity was not what they had pretended to be. And that terrified him more than anything he had ever faced in 200 years of warfare. Sat alone in a small room. It was not a prison cell, but it felt like one. The door was locked. Guards stood outside. She had been here for 12 hours. She did not mind. She had expected this. The door opened, and Commander Al entered. Behind him came 2 other beings. One was a tall female in the white robes of a High Council member. The other was something had never seen before. It was made of crystal, but not like the. This being was pure thought that had somehow become solid. It floated rather than walked. Its surface shimmered with colors that had no names in any human language. "I am High Arbiter," the crystal being said. Its voice came from everywhere and nowhere at once. "I speak for the Galactic Council. You will answer my questions truthfully. I will know if you lie." Nodded, "I understand." Moved closer. The colors in its crystal body swirled faster. "What are you?" it asked. Considered the question carefully. "I am human. I am exactly what I appear to be." "That is impossible," Al interrupted. His scales were dark with anger and fear. "No biological organism can do what you did. You caught a sonic blade 3 times with your bare hands." "I did," agreed. "Then you are not biological. You must have hidden implants, secret technology, something." Held up her hands. "Scan me, test me. You will find nothing but flesh and blood and bone." His crystal body pulsed, felt something move through her mind like fingers turning pages in a book. The High Arbiter was searching for deception. It found none. "She speaks the truth," announced. "She has no implants, no hidden technology. She is exactly what she appears to be," the crystal being paused, "and yet she is also something more." The council member in white robe stepped forward. "Explain yourself, human. How did you do what you did?" Was quiet for a moment, then she spoke. "Do you know what Earth is like?" she asked. "Do you know what kind of world we come from?" No one answered. "Our world is a death trap," continued. "We evolved surrounded by predators with claws and fangs that could tear us apart. We have no natural armor, no venom, no claws of our own. Our eyes are weak. Our hearing is limited. By every measure, we should have died out millions of years ago." She stood and walked to the small window. Outside, stars glittered in the endless dark. "But we survived, and do you know how?" She turned back to face them. "We learned to break our own limits." Explained. She told them about human biology. She told them about the chemicals in the human brain that normally prevented the body from using its full strength. These limiters existed for a reason. Without them, humans would tear their own muscles and shatter their own bones. But in moments of extreme stress, these limiters could fail. Mothers had lifted vehicles off their trapped children. Soldiers had fought through wounds that should have killed them instantly. Athletes had performed feats that scientists said were impossible. Humans called it many things: adrenaline surge, hysterical strength, the flow state, the zone. Called it the edge. 300 years ago, she said, we cracked the code. We learned how to control it. We learned how to reach the edge whenever we chose, not just in random moments of crisis. She flexed her fingers slowly, deliberately. When I am on the edge, my reaction time drops to microseconds. My strength multiplies tenfold. Pain becomes optional. My senses sharpen until I can hear your heartbeat from across the room." Al's scales flickered with disbelief. "That is not possible." "It is possible," said. "It just costs us. The training takes decades. Those of us who master the edge age faster. We burn brighter and we burn out sooner. But while we burn, we are capable of things that should not be possible." Floated closer. "How many of you are there? How many humans can do this?" "We call ourselves Edge Walkers," said. "There are currently 8,000 of us on Earth. We are training more every year." The room went silent. 8,000 humans who could catch sonic blades with their bare hands. 8,000 humans who could move faster than eyes could track. 8,000 humans who had broken the rules that every other species in the galaxy accepted as absolute. And they were training more. The council member in white robes spoke. Her voice trembled slightly. "Why did you hide this? Why did you pretend to be weak?" Smiled that same small smile. "Because we needed to know what kind of galaxy we were joining." She explained that humanity had been watching the Galactic Compact for years before making official contact. They had studied the politics, the wars, the way stronger species treated weaker ones. They had seen how the hegemony used its power. "We needed to know if you were worth revealing ourselves to," said. "We needed to know if you would see us as partners or as threats." "And what have you decided?" asked. Looked at the crystal being directly. "I have not decided yet. That is why I am still here." Al made a sound of anger. "You dare to judge us. You are one human. We are a civilization that spans 10,000 worlds." Turned to face him. For a moment, just a moment, she let the edge show in her eyes. Al stepped backward. He could not help it. Every instinct in his ancient warrior bloodline screamed at him that he was standing before something dangerous. "I am not here to threaten you," said quietly. "I am here to observe, to learn, to decide." She let the edge fade from her eyes. "So far, I have seen arrogance. I have seen cruelty. I have seen young cadets mocked for their weaknesses instead of helped to overcome them." Her voice hardened slightly. "But I have also seen those same young cadets help each other when the instructors were not watching. I have seen them share food with those who had none. I have seen them protect the weak when they thought no one was looking." She looked at each of them in turn. "There is good here. It is buried under tradition and politics and pride. But it is here. That is why I have not left. That is why I have not reported to Earth that this galaxy is not worth saving." His crystal body pulsed with new colors. "You believe you could save us?" Shook her head. "I believe you could save yourselves, if someone showed you how." She sat back down. "Now you have your answers. What happens next is up to you." The council members looked at each other. They had come here expecting to interrogate a primitive alien. They had found something very different. They had found a warning. And they had found an offer. They just did not know yet which one would matter more. The alarms woke everyone on Nexus Station at the same moment. Was already moving before the sound registered fully in her mind. She rolled out of her bed and pressed herself against the wall next to the door. Her body shifted into the edge without conscious thought. Time seemed to slow around her. Colors became sharper. She could hear footsteps running in corridors 3 levels below. Something was very wrong. Commander Al's voice came through the station speakers. It was tight with controlled fear. "All personnel, this is not a drill. Nexus Station has been infiltrated by hostile forces. The cadet barracks have been taken. All combat personnel report to defensive positions. All others, shelter in place." Opened her door and looked out. Station guards were running past, their weapons drawn. One of them saw her and shouted for her to get back inside. She ignored him. She moved through the corridors like a shadow, following the sounds of chaos. The edge fed her information through her enhanced senses. She could smell pheromones, the specific chemical markers of aggression and territorial dominance. She could hear deep voices speaking in a language she did not know. When she reached the observation level above the cadet barracks, she understood everything. Separatists, at least 40 of them, maybe more. They wore black armor marked with a symbol recognized from intelligence briefings. The Unbroken, a radical faction that believed the race should rule the galaxy alone. They had taken the cadet barracks. Over 200 young beings from a dozen species were huddled in the center of the main room, surrounded by armed warriors 3 times their size. Watched as the separatist leader stepped forward. He was massive, even for a. His bone armor had grown in thick ridges across his body, and his eyes were the color of dried blood. "I am the Unyielding," he announced through the station's hijacked communication system. "The hegemony will release our imprisoned brothers within 12 hours. For every hour of delay, we will kill 10 hostages." To prove he was serious, he gestured to one of his warriors. The warrior grabbed a young cadet. The crystalline being tried to struggle, but the strength was overwhelming. With one terrible motion, the warrior crushed the against the floor. The crystal body shattered into 1,000 pieces. The other hostages screamed. Some tried to run. The warriors pushed them back into the center of the room. His hands tightened into fists. She felt the edge surge inside her, demanding action. But she forced herself to wait. She needed more information. She needed a plan. She made her way to the command center. Commander Al was there, surrounded by officers shouting into communication devices. "Our tactical response teams are 12 hours away," one officer reported. "We cannot reach them in time." "Negotiate," Al ordered. "Buy time." "They are not interested in negotiation, Commander. They have already killed 1 hostage." Stepped into the room, every head turned toward her. "Let me go in," she said. Al stared at her. "You want to enter alone, against 40 warriors." 47, corrected. She had counted them through the observation window. "And yes, alone." "That is suicide." "No," said, "it is not." There was a long silence. The officers looked at each other. They remembered what had done in the training hall. They remembered her catching sonic blades between her fingers. But this was different. They were the most dangerous warriors in the galaxy. Their bone armor could stop energy weapons. Their strength could tear through metal. One warrior was considered equal to 10 soldiers of any other species. Was asking to fight 47 of them. Al made his decision. "If you fail, humanity's diplomatic integration ends. You understand this?" "I understand." "Then go." Went. She entered the cadet barracks through an atmospheric vent, sliding through the narrow space without making a sound. The edge kept her body perfectly controlled, every muscle moving with impossible precision. She dropped into a storage room behind the main hall. Through the door, she could hear the warriors talking among themselves. They were confident. They believed they had already won. She opened the door. The first warrior was looking the other way. He never saw her coming. Fingers found the gap between his helmet and his neck armor, striking the nerve cluster beneath. He dropped without a sound. The second warrior was turning when she reached him. She used his own momentum against him, redirecting his massive body into the wall. His head struck the metal with enough force to crack his bone helmet. The third warrior managed to raise his weapon, was already inside his guard. She drove the heel of her palm into his throat, crushing his windpipe. By the time the fourth warrior started to shout in alarm, she had already killed 7 more. The next 15 minutes were chaos. Moved through the warriors like a storm through dry leaves. She was everywhere and nowhere. When they fired their weapons, she was not where they aimed. When they swung their massive fists, she flowed around them like water. She killed 31 before they finally understood what was happening. The remaining 16 formed a defensive circle around and the hostages. They had abandoned offense entirely. They simply wanted to survive. stepped out of the shadows and walked toward them. "What are you?" demanded. His voice was steady but could smell his fear. It smelled like burning metal. "I am human," she said. She kept walking. They opened fire with everything they had. Plasma bolts scorched the air around her. Kinetic rounds shattered against the walls. Sonic weapons screamed. Walked through the barrage. Her body moved in ways that seemed to violate physics. She bent and twisted and flowed, always just slightly out of phase with the destruction aimed at her. When she reached the defensive circle, she did not slow down. The first fell with a broken neck. The second fell with shattered knee joints. The third fell when drove her fingers through the weak point in his armor and punctured his heart. One by one they fell, until only remained. The leader was truly massive. He stood nearly 4 meters tall, and his bone armor was the thickest had ever seen. He had survived 60 years of warfare. He had killed over 1,000 enemies in personal combat. He attacked with all of his strength. The fight lasted 4 seconds. Ducked under his first swing, stepped past his second and planted her feet. Her right hand shot upward, fingers extended. They punched through his ocular plate and into his brain. The unyielding fell. The hostages stared in silence. 200 young beings from a dozen species looked at the single human female standing in the center of 47 dead warriors. Was breathing hard. Her uniform was torn and stained with blood, though most of it was not hers. Bruises were already forming on her arms and face. But she was alive, and so were they. Al stepped forward from the group of hostages. The young who had once mocked her, who had called her weak, who had tried to humiliate her in front of everyone. He did not speak. He simply released his pheromones. Awe, fear, gratitude, and something almost like worship. Looked at him, she looked at all of them. "You are safe now," she said. Then she sat down on the floor, closed her eyes, and let the edge fade away. Her whole body began to tremble as the cost of what she had done started to hit her. But she was smiling, because she had seen something in those hostages that mattered. When the killing started, the older species had calculated acceptable losses. They had prioritized politics. But the young cadets had formed protective circles. They had shielded the weakest among them. They had refused to abandon each other even as they died. That was worth protecting. That was worth fighting for. That was why it had come to the stars. The galaxy changed in the days after the Crucible incident. It changed slowly at first, then faster, like a river breaking through a dam. Spent 3 days in the medical bay. Not because her wounds were serious, but because the hegemony doctors wanted to study her. They scanned her body 100 times. They tested her blood, her muscles, her bones. They found nothing unusual. Just a human, just flesh and blood and bone. That scared them more than anything else. The High Council convened an emergency session. Representatives from a dozen species argued about what to do. Some wanted to classify humans as a threat. Some wanted to offer them immediate alliance. Some wanted to pretend the whole thing had never happened. In the end, they invited to speak. The council chamber was vast. It had been designed to impress visitors with the power and majesty of the Galactic Compact. Hundreds of representatives sat in curved rows that rose toward a domed ceiling painted with stars. Stood alone in the center. She wore a clean uniform. Her bruises had faded to yellow shadows on her skin. High Arbiter spoke first. "Vance of Earth, you have demonstrated abilities that we did not believe possible for any biological organism. You have killed 47 warriors in single combat. You have saved over 200 young beings from certain death." The crystal being paused. "Why did humanity hide their true nature for so long? You let us believe you were weak. You let us mock you. You let us dismiss your entire species as primitives. Why?" Looked up at the gathered representatives. She saw and. She saw species she had never met and some she did not even have names for. She saw the rulers of 10,000 worlds. "Because we needed to know if you were worth saving," she said. The chamber erupted. Voices shouted in a dozen languages. Some representatives rose from their seats in anger. Others made sounds of outrage that translated poorly. Waited for the noise to die down. "We watched you before we made contact," she continued. "We watched your politics, your wars, the way you treated species weaker than yourselves. We saw cruelty. We saw greed. We saw powerful civilizations crush smaller ones for resources." Her voice remained calm. "We could have revealed ourselves at any time. We could have shown you what humans are truly capable of. But we wanted to see what you would do when you thought no one was watching. We wanted to see who you really were." She paused. "And we were disappointed." Several representatives made sounds of protest, but held up her hand, and something in that simple gesture made them fall silent. "We were disappointed in your leaders, in your systems, in your politics. But then we looked closer. We looked at your young people. We looked at your cadets and students and children." Her voice softened. "When the Unbroken attacked, your leaders calculated acceptable losses. They prioritized political outcomes over lives. But your young people did something different. They protected each other. They shielded the weak. They refused to abandon hope even when they were dying." She looked around the chamber. "That is what we were looking for, not strength, not technology, not power. We were looking for the spark that could grow into something better, and we found it in your children." The chamber was silent now. Even the most angry representatives had stopped their protests. "Humanity did not come to the stars to conquer," said. "We came because we saw something worth protecting. Your young people proved that the galaxy has a future worth fighting for." High Arbiter floated forward. "What do you want from us, Vance? What does humanity want?" Smiled. "We want to help you become what your children already believe you can be." The formal vote came 3 days later. Earth's diplomatic status was elevated to full partnership. Trade agreements were signed. Cultural exchange programs were established. And quietly, privately, several species began reaching out to Earth about defense treaties. Other species quietly canceled covert operations that had been planned against Earth's colonies. It was one thing to threaten a weak species. It was another thing entirely to threaten a species that could catch sonic blades with their bare hands. Al came to see before she left Nexus Station. The young stood in the doorway of her quarters, uncertain for the first time since she had met him. "I wanted to apologize," he said, "for how I treated you when you first arrived. I was arrogant, I was cruel, I did not understand." Nodded. "You were young. Young people make mistakes. What matters is what you do after you understand." Al's scales shifted color in a pattern had never seen before. Later, she would learn it meant deep respect. "I want to be better," he said. "I want to be worthy of what you did for us." "Then be better," said simply. "Protect those who cannot protect themselves. Stand up when others stay silent. Choose kindness when cruelty would be easier." She put her hand on his shoulder. "That is all any of us can do." Returned to Earth as a hero, though she refused the title. She was promoted to positions she did not want and offered honors she did not need. When asked what she would do next, she gave a simple answer. "Train more of us. There is a galaxy out there that needs protecting, and it does not even know it yet." Years passed. A new batch of cadets arrived at Nexus Station. Among them were humans. Dozens of them now from the second generation of Edge Walker training. They were young and eager, and they had been taught to appear unremarkable. The alien cadets who had heard the legends watched them nervously. In the back of the group, an older human woman observed silently. Her black hair was streaked with now. Lines had formed around her eyes. The cost of the edge was visible in the way she moved, slightly slower than she once had. But her eyes were still sharp, and her smile was still warm. Instructor Vance had returned to Nexus Station, not to fight anymore but to teach. A nervous young cadet noticed her watching. He recognized her from the histories. His scales paled with sudden fear. Caught his eye and smiled. It was the same smile she had worn years ago, standing in a training hall with a sonic blade trapped between her fingers. It was warm and friendly and utterly without threat. But the young saw what everyone eventually saw in that smile. It was the smile of something that had chosen to be kind, something that could destroy worlds but had decided to protect them instead. Something ancient and patient that had looked at the darkness between the stars and refused to be afraid. It was the smile of humanity. And it said very clearly, "We are here now. We are watching, and if you are worth saving, we will save you." The young straightened his spine. He met her eyes. He nodded once. Nodded back. The future of the galaxy walked into Nexus Station, wearing the faces of 100 different species. Some were old powers, some were new arrivals, some were humans who carried fire in their blood and refused to accept impossible. They did not know yet what they would become together, but knew. She had seen it in the way young beings protected each other when everything was falling apart. She had seen it in the way they refused to abandon hope. She had seen it in the spark that would not die no matter how hard the darkness pressed. The galaxy was going to be better. Humanity was going to make sure of it. And it all started with a smile.